As much of the nation reopens, the debate rages on. Are we moving too far, too fast? Or is the paralyzing fear of a hard second wave doing more damage than the virus? Here at home, a battle over mail-in ballots rages on in the courts. Should folks frightened of crowded polls have the option to cast from home? Or is the potential for voter fraud too great to risk? And from Harris County leaders, 30 million more local dollars for the vulnerable, including the undocumented. With so many citizens suffering, is it fair for them to move to the front of the line? I'm Greg Groogan, and welcome to What's Your Point, where our panelists call it like they see it. Let's greet them. Starting us off, Charles Blain, founder of Urban Reform. Next up, Bob Price, associate editor of Breitbart Texas. In the three spot, writer, educator, and radio host of Latino Politics and News, Tony Diaz. Batting cleanup, Fox 26 legal analyst and attorney, Carmen Roe. And closing us out, longtime Superneighborhood leader, Tomaro Bell. Let's begin. Remember these lines in Wisconsin. In the most dangerous hours of the pandemic, Americans forced to make a very tough choice. Risk infection standing in line to vote or forfeit their fundamental participation in the democratic process in an effort to protect their health. With elections coming soon in the Lone Star State, Democrats say it is a choice Texans should not have to make. They are fighting to allow all voters fearful of infection to vote by mail, as allowed in several other states. But top Republicans, including Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, believe the mail-in ballot proposal is unnecessary, unlawful, and ripe for exploitation.
66% of our voter fraud cases relate to mail-in ballots. So we know that there's more voter fraud just from experience from mail-in ballots. So I think that's why the legislature tried to balance those. Other states have gone full-fledged mail-in ballots, and that's up to them. But unfortunately, you know, we have some judges that thought they were legislators, and they decided to rewrite our laws and tell the Secretary of State, Texas Secretary of State, how to run their operation and tell us what we can do as well. We're worried about making sure that the voter is the one making the decision about their vote, not somebody else who goes out to nursing homes and hands out ballots, says, and here's how you vote, and basically fills in their ballot for them and then has them sign it. So that's the risk.
After a head-spinning flurry of litigation, the issue is now before the Fifth Circuit Court. Clearly, conditions will be different for the July Texas runoffs than the early April Wisconsin primary in the teeth of the pandemic. Panel, let's get going. Charles Blain, what do you think of mail-in ballots in Texas?
Listen, I think expanding it is just opening the door for more of the corruption. I mean, you look at South Texas and you see the politiqueras there and how much they take advantage of the mail-in ballot process and the vote harvesting that goes on. And even if you take out the nefarious side of expanding this process, you still have other issues. Like, for instance, I moved into my apartment a few months ago prior to the primary elections, and I was still getting voter registration cards for the guy who lived here before. So does his ballot come here? If it does, how does he get his ballot? Does my ballot go to my previous address? And then I think you still have other issues when it comes to who's going to verify every signature is matched on every single ballots. And when you're looking at these races that are really determined by a small number of votes, and you want to recount if you're a losing candidate, then you're going to have to pay for that recount, and it's going to be more expensive because more of this verification is going to have to take place. And that puts these candidates who are at smaller races or who have little money or who are just activists and want to step up and join the political process at a disadvantage because they don't have the money to verify these recount signatures the way that other candidates would. So I think you have a whole host of problems with this. I think the primary one is that it opens the door for corruption, but there are a lot of secondary issues that come along with it too.
Tony Diaz, do you believe this, I guess, Republican desire not to have mail-in ballots is actually voter suppression?
Yes, it's voter suppression. It's got voter suppression written all over it. I think indicted Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton needs to stop sabotaging the vote. And the language on this hasn't changed over years. It's been fine in the past. And pretty much, if you feel that you will be harmed, you can have a right to this. So you need to believe voters. I think this is so simple that we need to get it right, expand it the way it's existed for years. Don't let people have to risk their life or may put a chill on the vote. We need to move on too. We need to be working on online voting. So this is very passé. You're basically arguing against something that's already worked. We need to stop the voter suppression and expand it. So let's help older folks vote, folks who are scared about COVID-19, and let's move on to get the younger people to vote by voting online as well. Get with it, Texas.
Bob Price, you've been eager to talk about this issue for weeks. What's your take?
Well, first, I'm going to take the Bill King position here and talk about some statistics. Out of the 400,000 people who voted in person in Wisconsin, only 67 people got the coronavirus. And that doesn't mean they got it because they went to the polls and voted, but that's 0.01% of the people who voted got infected, and none of them died, by the way. So I think we're overhyping this fear of getting the coronavirus by going to the polls. If you can go to Walmart and maintain social distancing, you can go to the polls and maintain social distancing. The other problem, though, when you look at mail-in ballots, look at Harris County, who refuses to turn over their voter rolls to look through those and get them cleaned up and get dead voters out of there, get people that have moved out of there, all of this kind of stuff to stop that would make the ballots more reliable in a mail-in situation. Look what Washington State did over the years. The Democrats and Republicans worked together. They got the voter rolls cleaned up, and voter by mail is a much more accurate process up there than it would be in Texas, where you have tons of dead people on the rolls. You have tons of illegal aliens on the rolls. You have people that have moved that are on the rolls. All of that, Tony, you can shake your head, but that's true. And there's been criminal convictions to prove it. And so that said, the other underlying issue is there's no private ballot when you have voter by mail. If you've got someone in a household that wants to see the ballots for their spouse and their children, they can control how they vote. If you've got a union boss that wants to look at how the employees are voting, they can say, come on in, we want to see your ballot before you mail it. There's tons of, you want to talk about voter suppression or voter intimidation, mail-in ballots are rife with that. So let's do things the way that have worked for years.
Tomaro Bell, no one has deeper experience in retail politics than you. What's your take on mail-in ballots?
Look, the mail-in ballot process, I mean, if you take what Bob just says, you're basically saying that you shouldn't send mail-in ballots to seniors because they may need help filling them out or somebody may look at it. You have to do that. There are some people who just cannot come to the voting locations. They cannot. So should they not be allowed to participate?
No, they should.
Absolutely not. They should be allowed to participate. But I know seniors who even at church groups, when they get their ballots or something like that, they may not know every race. They may ask somebody. It's their choice. If they want to ask someone to help them do it, they can ask. So whether the ballot gets mailed to the house and you have a spouse and your husband and you all looking at it, I don't think there's a problem with them helping you look at the ballot or you ask questions about the ballot to get an understanding, especially when you're dealing with bond issues and stuff like that. But that being said, yes, I do believe that they do need to clean rolls, but they should have been doing this when the Republicans were the election clerks. They should have been cleaning rolls over the years, and then they wouldn't be in the position they're in now to say all of a sudden you really need to clean it, because it should have been done consistently. And I do believe that the mail-in ballot, for some people, it has changed with COVID. I don't believe, this just me, that everybody should be able to do a mail-in ballot. I don't agree with that because everybody is not prohibited from coming to a polling location. I do believe it may have to be broadened because some people may not want to take that risk because they just took chemo and maybe there was nothing wrong with them before that, but now they don't want to go to a poll. So I think the option should be there.
Got to stop there in 10 seconds or faster. Carmen, how will the Fifth Circuit rule on this?
You know, I'm pretty sure the conservative Fifth Circuit's going to stick with our Republican leaders. But I just want to say that I think it's fantastic that they can shut down our economy and then in the same vein say that this coronavirus is not serious enough to make any alterations in our voting procedures.
Gotta leave it there. Up next, an ongoing crime wave in the Bayou City. The leader of Houston's police union says local judges are putting dangerous predators on the street and innocent people are paying with their lives. A warning from Joe Grimaldi after the break. Just when you think Houston Police Union President Joe Grimaldi couldn't possibly get more incensed, an innocent civilian gets murdered or an officer's life gets threatened by a criminal free on bond. It is those avoidable tragedies which trigger in Grimaldi a new height of outrage.
The revolving door criminal justice system is not only harming our officers, but who it's really harming is our community. Lena Hidalgo stood in front of the State of the County address and told folks that bail reform was going to make our community safer. That was a lie. Aggravated assaults are up 23% in this city. Murders are up 49%. This May over last May, murders are up 111%. We've had 43 people murdered more this year over last. It has been an unmitigated disaster. And there are just examples upon examples, because surely folks say, well, you're just cherry picking. No, we're not. Just in the past week alone, we had Joshua Kelsey, who got out on under criminal justice reform for Kim Ogg, got out on deferred adjudication for felon in possession of a firearm. He was looking at 2 to 20. Kim Ogg gave him a sweetheart deal. He got out after only 40 days in jail, and he murdered 3 people. 3 people. Then we have Randy Lewis, who got 2 felony PR bonds after he'd been arrested 67 times. He never should have been given the sweetheart deals in the first place. He gets 2 felony bonds that the DA's office agreed to. He gets out and he murders an innocent 80-year-old grandmother. That family, our community, is impacted forever because of the decisions they are making. I'll give you another one. We have Clayton Bryant, who is out on 8 felony bonds. He had 14 felonies pending and has been arrested for 34 felonies. He was out on bond. He'd been given sweetheart deals his whole life. He led us on a chase that went across the city, endangered all of our officers and the community. It is completely out of control, and it needs to stop. Criminal justice reform and bail reform has been an unmitigated disaster here in Houston.
Stay with us. Our panel dives into the prospect of a growing crime wave and the very human cost of bail reform in Harris County. Murders and aggravated assaults are up in the city of Houston, not by just a little, but deep into double digits. With hundreds of people out of work and a long, brutally hot summer staring us in the face, prospects for relief from the crime wave appear lean at best, especially with a hyper-progressive criminal justice system, which views incarceration as a last resort. The police union blames Democratic reform judges and what they see as a lenient district attorney. The DA's office, which for the record disputed Grimaldi's claims against Kim Ogg in writing, says it's the judges who ultimately decide who gets released. And pulling the strings on the entire experiment, Harris County Judge Lena Hidalgo and her allies, Commissioners Rodney Ellis and Adrian Garcia. Okay, panel, what's your point? I'm going to start with our attorney, Carmen Roe.
Well, I'm not just an attorney, I'm a criminal justice attorney. And, you know, jail should always be a last resort. It's meant for people we're not mad at, but that we're afraid of. And I think the Harris County justice system is employing those types of standards at this time, unlike what we've done in the past. But I can also tell you that I'm a criminal justice minor. And, you know, you can sit around and talk about crime waves and things like that. Everybody will tell you that crime increases over the summer. It increases whenever there's an economic downturn like the one we have right now. And so I think that Joe Grimaldi's right that we have an increase in crime, but I think that our response to it has been as aggressive as it needs to be to keep those people in custody who need to be and to let the people who don't need to be in custody out so that we don't unnecessarily expose them to corona or any of the other viruses that are running through that jail system. And I think Harris County's done a really good job of pushing back against Lena Hidalgo and her team who wants to let everybody out. And then, of course, our district court judges, who are the only people who make decisions about who gets out and under what conditions, that these two people come together to make sure that we're as safe as possible in Harris County. That's exactly how that system's supposed to work.
Charles Blaine, is Carmen understating the problem? And everybody take about 30 seconds on this round of questioning. Go, Charles.
I don't think she's understanding the problem. I do think the part where I do differ is that there's been a lot of research, or not a lot of research, but some research that has come out that has shown that throughout the course of these few months that we've been in lockdown, many places have seen decreases in crime, except Houston and Baltimore. I mean, I think the Washington Post said we're up like, I think it was 12%, and just generally speaking, but when you break it down and look at these different categories, we're up way more than that in different categories. And so it is really alarming, and I think that the buck stops at the county judge and at our district judges. The county judge and Commissioner Ellis are setting the tone, and the district judges are following suit. And what we're seeing is this, like you said, last resort for jail, and we're going to really do everything we can to make sure that no one goes there. I think the real issue here, though, is that we have to remember Houston has canceled 5 police cadet classes. We do not have enough police on the streets. We have like 30 different policing agencies across this county. There needs to be more collaboration between these agencies so that we can begin to curb this problem, because if they continue to operate in silos, we don't have enough of a force to combat the issues that we're seeing.
Tomaro, what are you hearing in the neighborhoods? Are people worried about rising crime? I mean, 48% increase in murders is frightening.
Let's get back to the justice system. Whether you call it just us or just this, Houston, we have a problem. I'm telling you, I do not agree that they're doing the best that they can do right now. I do believe that there are people who are getting out that should not be out. I believe this is inexcusable. You saying you're letting them out or you're not putting them in jail because of COVID, yet these people are repeatedly brutalizing, terrorizing, and robbing and murdering people. That's a problem. And when you have a tyrannistic leadership that you have currently in some of the people who are in the commissioner's court right now, this is where the judges end up being afraid and doing what they are told to do instead of what they should do. That's why we got a problem.
Tony Diaz, Camaldi calls criminal justice reform an unmitigated disaster. Are you supporting Judge Hidalgo's move in that direction?
I think Lena is doing a fantastic job. And what I see Republicans doing is Republicans are not looking for solutions. They're looking for scapegoats. They need to look to their own party. Republicans at the state level are undermining the respect for the rule of law, beginning with an indicted Texas Attorney General who dispenses law arbitrarily. So he will then support someone who is a nail salon owner because they're part of his party and breaks the law. He will then in turn not help Latinas in the Valley who committed the same crime. That's arbitrary, and they're undermining each other.
It's also what punishment are they still
the Lieutenant General for Dan Patrick to say undermine rule of law and then have the nerve to say he'll serve that time at home instead of actually in jail. We're all sequestered anyway, so they need to look to their own party to uphold the rule of law.
30 seconds, Bob Price, close us out.
I'm going to ignore Tony's fantasy world and just go on to say, look, the violent crimes are up dramatically, and this is a continuing effort by the Democrats to go way overboard on criminal justice reform. I agree there should have been criminal justice reform, but this is a classic Rahm Emanuel, never let a crisis go to waste. We're just going to throw the book out and let all of these people out of jail, and now we're paying the consequences of that. And those, by the way, are most importantly impacting the minority community.
Got to leave it there. Up next, among the crimes that's spiking during this pandemic, domestic violence. This week, a prominent, once powerful politician brutally beaten by his girlfriend. We are going to talk about it just ahead. Back, it's fair to say that at this very moment, someone in our community is being brutalized or abused in their home by a significant other or a family member. Few, if any, of those crimes will make the news, but this one certainly did. Wednesday, the girlfriend of former Texas Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst was charged with injury to the elderly. Prosecutors say 40-year-old Leslie Karen kicked the 74-year-old Dewhurst on 2 occasions with enough ferocity to fracture 2 ribs. And like many domestic abuse victims, Dewhurst says he is not going to press any charges. Panel, what do we make of this? I'm going straight to Carmen Roe.
You know, domestic violence is something that's pervasive in our community and not well understood. And one of the things people don't understand is in Harris County, we aggressively prosecute domestic violence. So whether or not David Dewhurst wants to press charges is not going to be the issue. The DA's office is going to go forward with this case. The other thing that I think is really important is that a lot of people don't think men can be victims of domestic violence, but unfortunately that's a stigmatism that they place on men who are victims. And in this case, he's every bit the victim that any woman would be. And so I think it's a great opportunity for people to realize that. And last but not least, I think people need to keep in mind, you have to check on people. This coronavirus, we talked about mental health. We talked about people being in homes with other people without getting out and getting the regular socialization that they need. We just had a gentleman yesterday who's a firefighter who ended in a murder-suicide. It was a domestic violence case as well. Check on your people, do what you can to help. These are important cases that we need to focus on right now.
Okay, quick responses, people. Tomaro Bell, your take.
Yes, I was going to talk about how sad it is and tragic that you have a first responder who ended up killing himself and killing his wife when they had an infant in the house. So this just shows you domestic violence is not, no one is immune from it, and how, you know, people need to try to talk to people and try to see if they can help them see what they're dealing with. This coronavirus has put people in scenarios they never in their worst nightmare imagine they'd be in. And it does take us being able to engage with one another to try to help where we can.
Okay, Tony, pick it up.
The San Antonio Express News had a really powerful editorial about this, pointing out that men are stigmatized and there's shame in admitting that you're a victim on this. So that's, I think, very important to keep in mind. I think additionally, it is fascinating that is someone that is perceived as powerful, well-connected, who is suffering under this. I think we should also keep in mind all the folks that don't have that sort of access who are suffering as well. And we should come together as a society to help all these folks who are in need.
Bob Price, take 20 seconds, then Charles.
Well, I hope the Governor Dewhurst will take the opportunity here to reconsider on this. He's in a position now to really shine some light on the issue of domestic violence, and I think it would be very helpful if he came forward and kind of led the way on this issue. You know, he did great work for the state of Texas, and it's very sad to see something like this happen to him, but it's happening all throughout our community, regardless of economic status or race, minorities, whatever. It is a problem that we have got to deal with, and I hope that we can do that.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Still ahead, the COVID-19 debate that's still dividing the country. Have our leaders open too soon or not soon enough? New numbers released by the CDC may just shed some much needed light, so stay with us. Welcome back. As the nation remains deeply divided over the pace and potential hazards of reopening, there is new data and fresh projections from the Centers for Disease Control. The COVID-19 mortality rate among those infected is 0.4%. By contrast, the mortality rate in recent years for common strains of the flu is 0.1%. That's not to downplay the lethality of this virus, which has killed more than 94,000 Americans to date. It is, however, an important point of reference given the pandemic's cascading cost to society. Experts are still warning of a major Texas surge in June and claim the virus is still spreading here at epidemic levels. But President Trump announced the nation would not enter a second shutdown if a second wave of COVID-19 emerges, regardless of its severity. This during a week when he was seen wearing a mask in Detroit and later returning to his practice of speaking with no facial protection, all while on a regimen of the controversial drug hydroxychloroquine, which a respected study determined may actually kill more COVID patients than it helps. Panel, a lot to unpack there. Let's start with Charles Blain. Take your pick.
Yeah, that's a lot. So let's start with the president. I think he's been getting a lot of heat for this. The reason he was wearing a mask was because he was visiting a private business that had a rule in place that required people to wear masks. And I think that should serve as a sign to a lot of folks out there who happen to be on my side, who are out there claiming constitutional violations because Walmart requires you to wear a mask. Private businesses are allowed to require what they want, and if you want to frequent the business, then you should follow their rules or not complain about it. So I'm going to start there. But on the second note, this notion that experts are now saying that we're going to see this resurgence because people are now coming out and doing things that they want to do. Listen, throughout the entire course of this, people have been still going out to parks and other locations and, you know, having parties and doing stuff. And we haven't seen the spikes that they always claimed we would. And so I'm hesitant now to say that we're going to see this because we started to reopen. And I don't blame them for saying that they're not going to shut down again. The economy can't take a full stop like it did before. So, you know, more power to them. And let's just hope that we don't have to deal with this again. Florida, Georgia, and Texas are doing pretty well. So I think it's a good sign.
Well, some don't think that. I mean, Tony, the infection rate here in Texas has been pretty steady around 4 to 5%. Do you think Abbott is ultimately going to have egg on his face if we have a spike in June?
Well, there are lives at stake. I think it's a big mistake to think that COVID-19 is the flu's little brother. The 0.4 mortality rate is probably an undercount. There are reports that sometimes when they have a death certificate, they may not include it. You've got all these elder folks home, nursing homes where they've hidden dead bodies. So I think the 0.4 mortality rate is an undercount. And for a civilized society, that is unacceptable. I think it can get worse if we're not careful. The only reason the number is that low, because it could be a lot higher, is because we closed down the rodeo, we closed down schools, we closed down sports seasons, we closed down restaurants. We went out of our way to keep the number that low, so it can only go higher. And I'm just worried. I don't want to be right. We don't want to be right about this, but we're going to see an increase right now here in Texas. Right now, Memorial Day opening, I want people to be careful. I don't want them to get sick, but I want us to be prepared to stay healthy and keep these wives moved. So I think it is wrong for the Trump administration to plan to ignore our safety. They should come up with ways to do both things. We want to work and we want to live. Do both. Be the government. Do right.
Okay, Bob Price, do you think the Texas reopening is proceeding at a safe pace?
Yes, I do, and the numbers back that up. It's interesting, the liberal media, particularly ABC News, last week tried to come out and say that there was this huge spike after the reopening in May, and that's just not true. The numbers are steady from where they were since the peak back in mid-April. So, in Texas mortality rate, there are only 8 states in the United States that have a lower mortality rate from COVID than Texas does, and yet testing is on the massive increase in the state now. About a month ago, we were testing about 8,000 people a day, up to 16,000 people a day. And that's a big difference in terms of changing the numbers and how they look. You're going to see more positive cases, but the positive testing rate has been dropping steadily over the last month.
Tomaro Bell, what's your take on this? Are we doing it right in the state of Texas? What do you think of the president's actions?
Listen, I don't believe that we should shut down the country again. I don't think we should have shut it down to begin with. I believe that we should have required facial covering a little earlier than we did, but I think it should have been another way that this should have been handled. I don't think it should have been a total shutdown. That's just me personally. But let me tell you about the testing. Yes, the testing sites are increasing, but this is the problem. Every test site that we have in this city thus far is a drive-through. What if you don't have a car? There's a lot of people that do not have cars in the inner city. I mean, a lot. If it wasn't, Metro wouldn't exist in those areas as heavily as those routes are. Somebody has got to make it so that those people can be tested. And yes, I do expect when people are tested, numbers will rise. But that doesn't mean the disease is spreading. That means our awareness is spreading because we might not have known. I did a report with Channel 2 a couple of days ago, and they did it on the Superneighborhood, which is a very good map of Houston, Texas. And they showed how they had some hot spots in Manchester, Settegast, Trinity Garden areas. But I'm telling you, if you look at those areas, those are high multi-transit users in those communities. Somebody has got to start testing people on foot traffic, not on car traffic only.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it right there. Still ahead, amid a colossal collapse in energy demand, an insightful new documentary reminds us why the juice of electricity is absolutely essential to our civilization. Stay with us. Watch Your Point. We'll be right back. Welcome back. No one has taught me more about energy over the last 20 years than the prolific author, now filmmaker, Robert Bryce. His new documentary, Juice: How Electricity Explains the World, is truly an illuminating journey for those seeking to understand exactly why our destiny as a species is interlocked with the electron.
We're telling the human story of electricity and why power equals power. Electricity is fundamental to modernity, that this form of energy nourishes humans more than any other form of energy, and therefore we need more of it.
Just plug in. I'm ready.
There are 3.3 billion people in the world today who use less electricity than my kitchen refrigerator. That's the disparity we're facing. Countries today where electricity is short or non-existent, women and girls are effectively slaves to household chores, gathering wood, cooking with dung or wood, and washing clothes by hand. So electricity is essential. It is the essential liberator. As I say in the film, electricity liberates women and girls from the pump, the stove, and the wash tub. So if we're going to be serious about climate change, if we're going to be serious about women's rights and inequality, we have to be laser focused on electricity. And in focusing on it, we should be taking a humanist approach, which is that it is immoral and in fact just flat wrong to deny the developing world the opportunity to electrify. And if they're going to burn hydrocarbons to do it, I say then they should do it, because that's what we did. I think the thing that touched me and maybe surprised me at the same time was the depth of energy poverty that still exists in the world. And that for just the want of a few watts of electricity, and I mean a precious few, that people's lives have been changed. Darkness kills human potential and electricity nourishes it.
Still to come, 30 million Harris County dollars headed to help those hardest hit by the pandemic. But should residents living here illegally expect to get a share of the financial aid? Our panel jumps in after the break. Welcome back. By yet another 3-2 vote, a deeply divided Harris County Commissioners Court dipped into its diminishing savings account this week and pulled out $30 million for direct cash grants to families and individuals Judge Lena Hidalgo calls the neediest of the needy. The funds will flow through the hands of nonprofits directly to residents, many of whom receive no federal stimulus check because they are living in Harris County without immigration documentation. Commissioner Jack Cagle says he voted against the aid because it's more than likely not to be reimbursed by the federal government. Hard question. In a time of limited resources, should citizens have priority over non-citizens, or should it really not matter? I'm going to go to Bob Price first on this.
Well, it does matter. And let me add something on what Commissioner Cagle said. The commissioner brought forth a very reasonable compromise that maybe the county should pay the money directly to the landlord and not to the individual to make sure the money's going where it's supposed to go. And that was rejected by Rodney Ellis and the Democrats on the commissioner's court. So it's not about, it's just about throwing out money, trying to buy votes, and it's not going to be effective in doing what they say they're trying to accomplish. But illegal aliens in this country broke the law to get here. So what makes you think that they're going to use the money in the way it's intended, and why should the American taxpayer be forced to fund that kind of payments?
Tony Diaz, your rebuttal.
I tell you what, if you've got a hard time with undocumented labor, don't eat the tomatoes. And guess what? This is a problem. We're mad at each other because the Trump administration's hypocrisy. On one hand, they tell farm workers they're essential workers, even though they're undocumented. And then here on the ground, you're going to have the audacity to turn your back on these families when they need help for rent. That's the real problem. Trump has mismanaged this so that we've got 50 different states, 50 different rules. In Texas, it's 200 plus counties with 200 different rules. Everyone is their walking COVID-19 own program because our president doesn't know how to lead. I want to keep it positive, though. I'm proud of the Houstonians that stick together to create testing sites. Cristina Morales, who's a Texas state rep, and LULAC Council 60, Al Castillo, and Gracie Sines, they funded a whole program on 6815 where it's free testing all week long. So let's get our act together. Let's help each other. Let's not scapegoat, and let's not fall into the trap of the president's hypocrisy.
Carmen Roe, how do you fall on this issue?
You know, I don't think the issue is about the people at all, as much as it's about Lena Hidalgo's conclusion that the neediest among us in Houston happen to be undocumented. And if my math's right, we've got $45 million that we've allocated in Harris County for people who are here illegally, who aren't paying into a system that they're then getting back on. But the biggest issue is that I think there's a problem with saying that they're the neediest among us. But my biggest issue across the board is with this administration and their fairness and their transparency in distributing funds. And I would cut to the B-roll of Harvey money. Where is that? And how did we help the neediest among us? So here we are again with an administration that we're depending on to make sure they get $45 million of money. We don't have money that our citizens paid into to give to the neediest among us. And I don't think they can do it. And I don't think this is going to do it.
Tomaro Bell, there are citizens who will not get county aid and not a citizen that will. Is that a problem?
The problem that I have with this is that this is the first time I've heard of any money being distributed based on somebody's culture or their race. I don't know of any other. I could be wrong, but I don't. And I don't think that that's the part that I have. That is the problem that I have with this. Now, secondly, let me tell you what everybody is not looking at. You're talking about crime going up. You're talking about murders going up. You're talking about domestic violence going up. Come June 1st, or somewhere in June at the latest, the moratorium on evictions is going to be over. It's going to be over. And then you're going to have people saying, oh, God, help me because my baby's here. This needed to be addressed in a better way. That is just my opinion. Because when that occurs, people are not going to let their children go hungry. People are not, where do you think they're going to go if they don't have a job? What are they going to do? You talk about crime going up. So I think this should have been handled in a different way. And I told y'all this a couple of weeks ago. It ain't about the message, it's about the messengers. Because you just asked what happened to the Harvey money. There's other money you need to be asking what happened to for them to come up with this. I'm just saying.
Let me stop you there. Final 30 seconds for Charles Blaine.
Yeah, big issue here is that Commissioner Garcia must have a money printer in his office that we don't know about, because a couple months ago they were asking to raise taxes on these same people, and now he's just making it rain left and right for them. But I think the other issue here is that they're using the social vulnerability index, which they've never clearly defined and explained how it's calculated. When we were having this discussion months ago when it came to the flood bond dollars, they're using that to determine who is eligible for this funding. And so that gives me a lot of concern because it is not a transparent process. What I would have rather them do is maybe take this 30 million, couple it with the city's 15 million, and let the city or collectively distribute it based on, average median income, the way that the city did, so that we know who needs it and where. Because this way, with the way they're doing it, we're going to see people in Cagle's precinct and Commissioner Raddick's precinct who are low income, who do need the money, who aren't going to get the money simply because of where they fall on the social vulnerability index, and that's wrong.
Got to leave it there. Up next, no stranger to inexplicable statements. Presumed Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden unloads a head-scratching whopper. Our team dives in after the break.
So if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
Joe Biden, no stranger to the gaffe, is walking back that statement to radio host Charlemagne the God. Biden later apologized, saying it was not his intention to appear to be taking the African-American vote for granted. Among those taking serious issue, Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina.
Who in the heck does he think he is? That is the most arrogant, outrageous comment I've heard in a very long time.
Okay, panel, should Joe Biden get a pass? President Trump talks about why African-Americans should vote for him all the time. Charles Blaine, your take.
No pass whatsoever, and neither should Charlemagne. He's a fool for letting that happen and for not pushing back against that, because it's incredibly ignorant to allow Joe Biden to say that, because what he is saying is what a lot of white liberals believe but just don't say out loud very often, is that black people should vote Democrat, and if they do not, well, then there must be something wrong with them. And so I think it's crazy to hear a presidential candidate say it out loud, but it's true. I mean, I was at a polling location last year and had a liberal come up to me, and a white liberal come up to me and tell me in her Prius that I was working against my own interests because I was supporting a Republican candidate. So this is not something that's unique to the party. It's just the first time it's being exposed on such a broad scale.
Tomaro Bell, does Joe Biden deserve a pass on this, or is he taking the African-American vote for granted?
He does not deserve a pass for this. And I'm glad that the South Carolina politician called him on it, because the Republicans don't say nothing when Trump on a daily says some dumbass statement and they don't say anything about it. It could be racial, sex, or whatever. They say nothing. He gets a pass all the time. If dense as hell comments kept you from being elected, he would not be president.
Okay. You want to jump in here real quick, Carmen Roe? We got about 30 seconds.
Sure. You know, I think that Joe Biden seems like a fun guy at a party. I don't think he's serious enough to run our country. I think that, you know, instead of taking the momentum from Trump right now, he's making yet another off-color remark that he's having to apologize for. At the end of the day, I think we're headed into November, unfortunately, with two white men, both of which are out of touch with the American people.
Okay, well, we're going to continue this discussion after the break.